Welcome to the Bywords Show. I'm your host, Hannah Hughes. Bywords is all about equipping women for purposeful living by starting conversations, celebrating stories, and inspiring faith. In a world that applauds the hustle, I'm here to help you break free from the lies and come back to what really matters. It's time to get real, get rooted in truth, and come alive in relationship with Jesus so you can show up to each day with intention and confidence no matter where you're at in your story. Here we believe that embracing our stories brings hope, healing, and purpose to the process, and sharing our stories helps others do the same. Whether you're looking for a midweek faith refresh, practical tools for pursuing your dreams, or just need some good old-fashioned girl talk, you're in the right place. Grab your latte and let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bywords Show. Today is the day. I'm so glad you guys are here. We're going to have fun today. We actually have Jordan Dooley with us. So Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, I got to ask you our little icebreaker warm-up question before we get started. What is filling your cup lately, both literally and then figuratively?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say it's interesting because in some ways it empties my cup and fills it at the same time. But we were just talking about this before you started recording. My sons are getting to that age where they really have their personalities coming out, and they have, they're just unique things that they love to do. And so I've loved just getting to play with them this summer. Last summer, they were both babies, and it was just survival mode. This summer it has been so much fun too, even though it's still survival mode with toddlers. It's like, I don't know if it gets easier because it's actually easier, because you just get more comfortable at parenting and you get more confident. But this summer has been so fun, and we've done so many fun family activities and just playing with them, and randomly in the afternoon. And it's like the same thing that drains me also fills me up. And so I think because it's a season I've waited and prayed for so long, and I think because last summer they were such babies, and so there was just so much survival. I wasn't sleeping. I remember feeling like, man, I'm not enjoying this the way I thought I would. It wasn't what I pictured, and now it really has been that sweet, fulfilling, enjoyable, fun, exciting season. So honestly, just playing with my kiddos and doing fun summer activities has truly just filled such a hole in my heart that has been there for so long. So it's been really filling my cup for sure.
I love that. And then what's actually in your literal cup?
Literally, I have a decaf, mineral rich, organic, mold free, toxin free coffee.
I love that.
The full explanation, but I'm like, I can't just say coffee because this is the premium stuff. This is the good stuff.
Right. Okay, but what brand is it? Because I have so many friends who are now getting into this world, and I'm so intrigued because I just started drinking coffee again recently.
Same. I actually took years off of drinking much coffee when I was on our fertility journey and stuff. But okay, so the Wild and Well Fed shop, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's my friend Annika. Her Instagram is I am Annika Nicole. She's a good friend of mine, so I'm giving her a little plug here. But I get her coffee and she sources it. It's same day package, because a lot of times coffee apparently can grow mold in the bag as it sits on shelves. So they roast it and package it and ship it to you the same day to minimize any of that. And so anyway, yeah, it's a great brand. She's a nutritionist, of course, so she's sourcing all the best stuff, but it's good. I really like it.
Okay, that's amazing. I have to try that. That sounds so good. I haven't made my coffee yet today, so I'm my mouth is watering over here. But I love that. And so today we're going to be talking about finding clarity in your calling. And Jordan, I know that you've just inspired so many women, myself included, with your story and your books and just sharing your journey on the internet. Would you tell us a little bit about your story as far as navigating your calling and how your faith has evolved through the years with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big story, so I'll try to make it pretty concise, and then we can focus on different parts if you want. But the big story arc is I was a senior in college. This was, a decade plus ago. We're not going to go to the specifics, but it was about a decade ago. And I was looking out at, what careers awaited me when I graduated. And I just wasn't feeling excited about any of it. I had just recently gotten engaged to my now husband. And I just remember thinking, I know I want to have kids one day. I know that I'm very creative. And at the time, my degree was going to set me up to work in insurance. And I was like, that's just not doing it for me, And so I started to just dabble. My senior year, I started to dabble, junior into senior year, in entrepreneurship, wedding photography, Etsy shops, different things like that. And so as I was doing those kind of different creative freelance type projects, I started sharing my journey and thoughts and storytelling on a very new platform called Instagram, which is no longer new. But at the time in 2013, 2014, it was, pretty new. And I wasn't even necessarily trying to grow a business there, but I was trying to just share what I was doing. It was another creative outlet. I'm naturally a writer and a storyteller. And so that just over time evolved. It helped me grow a wedding photography business. It helped me grow an Etsy shop. And I was sharing a lot about my faith and my journey through engagement, body image stuff, all of this. And so after I graduated, flash forward a few years, I started getting asked to speak at college campuses and to sorority women. And so I started doing that. I mean, I wasn't very good at it, but I said yes and got better as I went. And I realized that I really like, writing and speaking and storytelling and pouring in and building community more than necessarily just taking pictures or doodling on things for Etsy, right? As much as that was kind of the outlet that started it. So that was what led to me really focusing a lot more on writing, and eventually years later writing my first book and then another book, and now I'm finishing my third book. And really, I say that my community on social media, it grew really quickly those first several years, but it has really grown up with me. A lot of my material and the things that I talked about were very geared toward college women and, recent graduates 8 to 10 years ago. And now they're very geared toward women in their 30s who are raising littles or on a fertility journey. And so, through my own journey, I shared a lot of my journey to motherhood, and that looked like a huge overhaul of my lifestyle when it came to just how I cared for my body. I thought health was, running all the time and eating salads and being super skinny. And then when I was losing baby after baby to miscarriage, I thought something's not right inside. And sure enough, a lot of testing revealed various issues that I tried to address mostly with lifestyle. And so I shared that journey. And so now that's a big part of what I talk about on my podcast that I started several years ago and what I write about and all of that. So, it's interesting how, and I share that kind of big story arc, and that's obviously leaving out a lot of detail, but I share that big story arc because I think sometimes as women, we think if I started with this, I have to stick with it. Or we think like, I got this college degree, I worked so hard toward this thing, or for the last several years, I've been on this path. And when we feel the need to pivot, we can almost feel like, well, am I being unfaithful to the thing that I'm supposed to be doing? Or, am I distracted? And maybe, but I think a lot of times we forget that like life really does come in seasons and it comes in phases, and what might work or what might be right for the first few years out of college or the years before you become a mom or the years when your kids are in school might look different when there's a new season of life or there's evolution that happens. And sometimes we have to pivot. And that's really what my journey has been just a series of pivots and doing the next right thing and not clinging so tightly to like, but this is the thing I've been doing and it has to stay this way. And I think that mindset has given me a lot of freedom to really walk in, what is God asking me to do now? So that's a quick overview of my story.
No, I think that's perfect. And it's so interesting hearing you talk about it and even how your community has kind of grown up with you. Because when I think about my own journey with purpose, I remember when I was young, like high school, college, thinking, okay, I want to do what God wants me to do with my life. And so I need to find my purpose, which is my one thing that I'm going to commit my whole life to forever.
Right.
And then it changes, like we go through hardships, we go through pivots, things don't turn out like we plan. And then all of a sudden we're like, I don't know what to do. So like now what's my purpose, you know? And so were there moments for you during those pivots or as you were learning like to take things in seasons where you were either confused or like, how did you sort and sift through that with the Lord, figuring out like, this is actually something that can evolve and change and that's okay?
Oh, absolutely. There's been a lot of times where I'm like, am I losing it? Like, am I just being so distracted and unfaithful? But what's really interesting is I feel like through a lot of my journey, God taught me something really simple. And I think it's important to just consistently come back to. He kind of revealed to me like, you're not really confused on your calling. We use this word kind of interchangeably. But if we really boil it down, especially as like believers, like you and I, like it really is just love God, love people, make disciples. It's really that simple. It's like, that's really our calling. What we're really trying to figure out is, God, what is my assignment in this season? What is the specific way you're asking me to carry that out? Maybe it's by working this career. Maybe it's by working in ministry. Maybe it's by raising children. Maybe it's by doing a little bit of a hybrid of both. But what we're really asking is, how can I use my gifting, my experience, my knowledge, everything that, I've experienced up until this point in my life to fulfill a worthy assignment that fulfills that calling, right? So in some ways that kind of takes the pressure off, because I think we try to figure out our big life purpose and calling when in reality, it's like, it's actually pretty simple. Like love God and love people, right? Now, the ways in which we're going to do that will vary season to season, but having that pressure of, oh, I don't have to like figure out one big grand purpose that I do for the rest of my life. And I have to do the same thing from a, career or life standpoint. Really, it's just the assignment for that season. And simplifying it that way helped me be a little bit more at peace with maybe the assignment needs to change because I've grown, because I've walked through hard things, because God taught me something, because I picked up new skills. So I need to integrate that,
Mm.
right? And so the more that you kind of come back to, I'm not really confused on my calling. I just need to get clear on my assignment for this season. It simplifies it a little bit, in my opinion.
That's so good. And I think that's spot on because so many of us, I heard somebody talk about a while back how so many of us in the American church have
Hmm.
started to confuse our purpose with the American dream. And we
Yeah.
have started
Yeah.
chasing this idea of success and fulfillment through money and job and
Yeah.
house and family and all of these things that look really pretty and aesthetic from the outside. But when
Hmm.
you really boil it down to, okay, like God makes it really clear what our calling as believers is.
Yeah.
But how that fleshes out in season to season
Yeah.
is actually not something that we need to get so hung up on
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
confused by.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of young women, and I mean, women of any age, honestly, any human who get really hung up and confused on
Yes.
it. So, are
Yes.
there obstacles or misconceptions that you've specifically seen, or things that we need to look out for that'll just get us so stuck and not able to actually operate in our assignments from season to season?
I mean, yeah, I think first, like one of the biggest things is we're looking at what other people are doing and wondering if we should be doing that too.
Mm,
I think we also shame ourselves into thinking I'm supposed to have done this because this is what I worked so hard for. I got this degree or I got this thing and then life changed and now I'm not feeling like, let's for example say I went to grad school, I spent all this time, this money to become a lawyer, and now I got pregnant and I have a kid and I feel like I'm not, being faithful to this but it's like I think we get caught up in it was supposed to be this. It's like, who says, and I
right.
also think this other lie that we believe, or maybe not lie, but maybe just, I don't know, it's kind of like a Christianism. I don't know if that's the right word, but we often say like, sometimes I believe that sometimes the clarity we're looking for comes from action, like from actually trying stuff, from actually putting ourselves out there, from
That's
maybe,
good.
truly not just thinking about it forever, but actually taking some action on something. Even if trying something looks like picking up a new hobby or taking that
Mm.
night class, or it's not that you have to abandon all responsibilities, but
Yeah.
if you have a curiosity about something or you're feeling a nudge towards something, maybe it's taking a micro step in that direction, whether it's professional or personal. In our personal life, I knew my husband and I had felt called to adoption before we even got like married. But when we were in the middle of our fertility journey, it kind of came back up. And I was like, well, I don't know that we need to jump full bore into adoption right now because I want to make sure we're doing that with the right heart posture. But I was feeling nudged in that direction. So we ended up working with like a respite type program for like, it's like almost like short term foster care. That was our way to kind of dip our toe in the water and start
Mm.
exploring and trying different things that we felt God was calling us to in our personal life, not just professionally. And that was what really opened the door to now having adopted, right? So anyway, it's like you don't always have to jump into the deep end. Sometimes it's just taking small little steps of action, and action can be the thing that God uses to create clarity. But I think sometimes we don't take the action and we say it's because we don't want to get ahead of God. Because we say, oh,
Mm.
well, I don't want to, I need to be still. I need to wait. And true, there, you don't want to just make, rash, fast, decisions without thinking through things. But
Right.
I think sometimes we actually stop ourselves under the belief that we can get ahead of God. I'm like, are we powerful enough to get ahead of God? Like, I'm pretty sure he's bigger than us, And so while I understand the heart posture and the reasoning for that, and there's definitely times we can rush through things for whatever reason, I also think sometimes we fail to take action and then we cover it up. It's really fear, it's really anxiety, it's really uncertainty. And instead of taking action with faith, we allow that fear to hold us back and we cloak it in, well, I'm waiting on God, or well, I don't want to
Mm.
get ahead of God. And I think that's something that we as the church and women of faith can really get hung up on. And in reality, God's like, hey, as long as you're honoring me in it and you're not doing anything immoral, go. Like I will show you the next right step. Like his word says, a lamp unto our feet and a light into our path, right? Okay. Well, until you take the next step, the next one's not going to be illuminated. And I think sometimes we forget that we want the whole path shown to us and then we'll take action. And in reality, one step at a time will be illuminated. So I think just coming back to that truth of, as long as I'm doing this prayerfully and thoughtfully with discernment and counsel, I need to take action. I'm not powerful enough to get ahead of God or mess up his plan for my life because I've decided that I somehow am, So anyway, just that's I think something that we can really get hung up on too. And the clarity we're looking for sometimes comes from action and from trying things.
I think that's such a good point because I've been there. Like so many times in my
Same,
life, I
same.
don't want to start because I'm so afraid that I'm going to get it wrong,
Yeah.
or I want to wait until I have a 100% clear, written in the sky word
Yeah.
from God. And
Yeah.
sometimes that just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
then something I've learned in the past few years of kind of navigating that and some pivots in my own life and our family, not really, I'm not operating in faith when I'm just
Mhm.
sitting back and like
Mhm.
hoping things will fall into place, you know?
Yeah. We want it written across the sky like that. And we expect that that's how God's going to lead us. I wish I could remember who told me this. It was like a mentor of mine, but one time someone told me a lot of times God leads from the front and he does give us that crystal clear, like this is the move, this is the thing, go. But also a lot of times he leads from behind. And what they mean by that was sometimes he'll give you two equally good options or multiple equally okay options. Like I wouldn't say he leads and just lets us choose in terms of like, well, I guess he does let us choose, but it's not in the concept of like making a moral or immoral decision. But when it's just a
Right.
morally neutral decision of like a career path to choose or a place to live or these types of life decisions that we can get so hung up on, sometimes there's multiple options and we're waiting for God to be like, this is the one, flashing lights, you know? And sometimes he's actually like, hey, I'm giving you multiple options here. Pick one, honor me in either of them, and I'm with you. And we just like forget that, you know? So while we do need
Mhm.
to seek clarity and counsel and be prayerful, I think sometimes we think, oh, if God hasn't illuminated one clear as day and it's not written across the sky, I should not move, essentially is what we can believe. And that's not always
Yeah.
the case. Sometimes he leads from behind. And that's such a like, I think eye-opening mindset shift and like belief shift to be like, oh yeah, as long as I'm honoring you and making moral decisions in either way, we're not like, I keep coming back to this, when it's not a matter of a moral decision or right and wrong, when it's just one of these morally neutral decisions, we aren't powerful enough to mess up his plan for our life, you know? And I think that is such a humbling thought because I think we are sometimes. Our pride makes us think if I make the wrong decision, it's over from here, you know? It's like,
Right.
nope, that's actually not true, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good point. It is true. It's like, yes, this call that we have is high stakes, like it matters, and there's so much weighing on it. Like there's a lot of gravity in that. But
Mhm.
at the same time, there's so many decisions that are not life or death for us
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I agree. Like I think we just need to make a move, and you're so right. A lot of the time that's where that clarity comes. But on the
Mhm.
flip side of that though, I'm so curious to hear what you think about, maybe you have gone down a path. Like maybe there's someone who's in a path or in a role, like they're clinging to it so hard. Maybe it is time to pivot, but they're like, I thought this is what God called me to do. Like I don't want to let it go. What about those kinds of seasons?
Like when it feels almost like the possible death of a dream or letting
Yeah.
go of a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time, so I remember one of the things that there was actually two specific experiences that stand out to me, but I'll share one. Um, so my husband and I bought our first home and I thought this, like, I felt like God led us to this home. I felt like this was going to be the place we raise our family. And a few years into it, we were also in a wellness fertility journey just of our own. And that became the priority in our life. And testing and all those things are not always cheap, right? So we were
Mm.
in this season of being a young couple and we had this home on 3 acres. It was kind of a fixer upper. I mean, it was definitely a livable situation, but we had a lot of updates we needed to do to the home just to make it more comfortable for our family and all of these things. And so we thought we could run our businesses, be on a fertility journey, be Chip and Joanna Gaines, like all of the things at one time. And as we started prayerfully considering, like, what of our, like, we have all these good things, which of them are God things that we need to focus on, and which ones are distractions? And it became really evident very quickly as we started to really dig into home projects and all of that, that was actually really a distraction. It was not the best,
Mm.
it was not the best way to steward our resources financially or from a time perspective. Um, there were just a lot of things we discovered as we started different projects. And when we were about to do the biggest one, we were like, oh, this is not going to actually be very beneficial to us financially or from a time standpoint. So we really started thinking through, and God really showed me, like, this is a good thing. This property, it has been a dream of yours. I had such a vision for it. I felt like it was going to be where we, you know, maybe held retreats and raised a family and fulfilled that calling, you know. And I felt like I just kept getting the sense like, let it
Mm.
go. And I had such a hard time with it because it really was clear that this was a significant stressor in our life and a distraction from the priority. And I think that's important to touch on too, even just priority. When you're trying to get clarity on, like, God, what is it that I need to focus on? There in the book Essentialism, he talks about how priority was initially meant to be a singular thing, the priority. But in our culture, we've tried to turn it into priorities. And
Mm.
when you try to make everything the main thing, that means nothing is. And so when we got really clear on like what is our priority in this season, what do we really need to focus our energy, time, talent, resources, etc. on, and that was ultimately our family journey, we thought we can't be renovating a home and doing all these extra things that are really not necessary and probably adding stress to our life. So we ultimately ended up deciding to sell the home and simplify a little bit and get into something that wasn't going to require us to be Chip and Joanna Gaines. And so anyway, all of that said, it was one of those really devastating things. I mean, we actually put this for sale sign in our yard one evening, and the next morning I asked my husband to go take it down. Like, it wasn't actually like officially on the market yet. Our realtor was going to do it that day. And I was like, I can't do it. Because it was just such a heavy thing to release what I thought was going to be, because I had to not just release the home that I loved and the land that I loved, but also the hope that I had for it and the expectation I had of, we're going to raise a family here and this is going to be our long-term place. And letting, like, kind of a death of a dream in a way. It ended up being the very best thing. We eventually did put it on the market, and I'm very thankful we did. But at the time, it was such a battle in my heart and in my head, because I knew logically this was the right move for us in that season of life, but it felt like I was giving up. And I think sometimes we forget, there's that phrase that says winners never quit and quitters never win. But actually, I think winners quit all the time. We quit the wrong things for us. We walk away from the distractions. We set down the things that are no longer healthy for us or that God is calling us away from, but that doesn't make it easy. And I know that it was a wrestle for me. And so if it's a wrestle for you, if there's something in your life that you need to let go, that has been a good thing up until a point, but is no longer healthy, is maybe even now a distraction, whether it's an unhealthy relationship or, a house burden or another commitment you've taken on, whatever it might be. I think sometimes we think if it's the right decision, it should come easy.
Right.
And if God's on it, then it should be crystal clear and easy. And sometimes it's actually the hardest thing that we have to let go.
That's so true. And I'm glad you touched on that, because I do think that we have this idea of Christianity where, like when we're pursuing God's will for our lives, it should be comfortable. It should be easy. It should be,
Just fall into place.
pain-free.
Yeah.
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 And that's just so not the case. Like, he promises we're going to have trouble. He promises we're going to have hardship, and he promises that he's going to be in it with us. And so it is such a different approach when you think about, okay, like, at whatever cost, Lord, like, I'm willing to say yes because I know you're in it with me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take away the pain of it. Like, it doesn't make it any less hard. But even you mentioned, like, from the beginning, you guys had felt that tug towards adoption. And I know waiting has been a big piece of your journey as well. If we're in a season where we feel like we're starting to get that clarity on our calling, or, starting to take steps, but it's a timing thing, maybe, like, how do we know if it's time to push versus like, okay, maybe it's just a timing thing, and Lord, we do need to just, stay here for a season and wait for the next door to open, or what does all that look like?
Yeah. Honestly, there's no one size fits all, but I will say, I think one of the wisest things we can do, because it is hard to know, like, do I give up? Is all these closed doors and all of this no and all of this waiting, like, is this meant to be something I release? Or is it something that I'm supposed to endure through? And it can be so hard to know. But I think something that's really helpful is honestly seeking counsel. I love the advice to have like a board of advisors, basically. And usually there are a handful of people in your life that you really trust who have gone before you. Maybe your spouse, maybe your mom, maybe some mentors, maybe a pastor, maybe a couple really close friends who've walked a similar road. But having your handful of people that you've designated of, these are the voices I'm designated to speak into my life. And taking that to them. There was a time I closed the doors of one of my businesses, and I was really unsure because it seemed silly. Like, it was financially fine, it was working, it was good, but it just felt so exhausting and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. And there were various reasons why I decided it wasn't the path I wanted to continue with, or I felt like maybe I didn't want to continue with, but I thought, well, I don't want to be a poor steward, and maybe I'm just maybe I'm just burnt out. So I don't want to just close the doors for nothing. So I, ran that by some friends and some mentors and people in my life I trusted. And ultimately it was like most of them were pretty much singing the same song and unanimous in their guidance and in their analysis of how it was affecting me. And so that gave me more clarity of, okay, this is something I need to set down. Whereas there's been other times where I was like, maybe I just shouldn't be doing this. I'm tired. And I've had these wise voices speak into my life and say, actually, maybe you just need a break, but this is something maybe to power through, right? Like, it's actually, so sometimes allowing those people who are close to you, close to the situation, but not as emotionally invested, or who can look at it a little bit more objectively, truthfully, biblically, etc., just speak into it and help you kind of process through that, is where a lot of times you can get the clarity you're looking for too. Counsel brings clarity as well.
Yeah, I think that's so huge. The community piece in figuring out what our purpose is in each season trying to figure it out on our own, we get so in our
Yeah.
heads
Yeah.
and everything starts to look the same way and sound the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah.
And then we also end up getting stuck there. So I think that is also such a huge piece of it. So I love that you brought that up. Are there any
Yeah.
other things that you would recommend for someone who's maybe never really felt that clarity or is in a season
Mhm.
where I'm like, I don't know, I just feel kind of like aimless. I'm willing to do what
Mhm.
God wants me to do, but I've got no clue. How
Yeah.
do we start to figure out what that next best step is?
That's where I come back to action. I mean, start trying things, start volunteering, pick up new hobbies. Consider what are the things I've always wanted to try or that seem interesting to me. Maybe it's time to read some books on topics you've never considered before. Listen to some podcasts on topics that are unique. Maybe it's time to learn about money management or about women's health or about, whatever it might be, but just figure out like, and not even figure out, stop trying to figure it out and just allow yourself to learn new things. I think about like, there was a season of where I was feeling a little bit aimless. I had closed the door of some, I let go of a lot of things. I let go of our home at the time. I closed the doors of one of my businesses. I really slowed down in various areas. And I just remember feeling like, and now what are we doing? And I talked to a friend and she said, this is your boot camp season, learning to be slow and still and um, try the things that you probably won't be able to try if you get to the motherhood season that you're hoping for. Right. And so
Mm.
that was the season I checked things off my bucket list. I traveled. I learned a lot of new things. I started new hobbies. We planted a garden. I read books on topics I was curious about. I asked my dad to teach me to play poker, which seems so irrelevant, right? Like when you first think about it, you're like, what does that have to do with my calling? But I think sometimes when we just do the same thing, we watch the same shows, we go to the same job, like when we get caught in like the regularity, the familiarity and the comfortability of life and the things we've just enjoyed and done for our whole life, we miss the opportunity for God to teach us or show us things that we don't even know we have a passion for or that we're interested in
Mm.
or that we have a connection to. So I think sometimes when we're in this place of like, I don't know what's next, it's like, great, roll up your sleeves and try, time to play. Honestly, it's like time to experiment. It's time to try new things, to get involved, to serve your community, because sometimes God will break your heart for what breaks his in a place you never thought you would even go because you allowed yourself to go there. Sometimes, he'll reveal a talent of yours you didn't know you had because you don't really spend much time cooking. But the more time you've cooked, you're like, wow, I actually am really good at baking. These things that you otherwise wouldn't know. And then those sometimes lead to the next right step or the next idea or the next inspiration or the next relationship or connection or open door that you really need to take. So that's why I say it always is important to come back to action. And I'm not talking about big, grandiose, massive action. In my first book, I wrote about incremental, implementable, imperfect action steps. And I know that's a mouthful, but if you really break that down, incremental means small, like small little actions, small little things. Try the new hobby, go to that book club, those little things you can add to your life. Implementable is something you can do right where you are. You don't need a bajillion-dollar budget or 1,000 new hours of free time. Just can you add one thing that you find interesting to your plate? Can you throw on a podcast while you're in the car, right? Something you can implement in your existing life right now. And then imperfect, it's like you don't have to be a pro at it. Allow yourself to be an amateur at whatever it is that you try, whether it's a new skill or a hobby or a dance class or a volunteer project or whatever. And usually those are the things that will like re-inspire you or open your eyes to things or create the connection that you wouldn't have otherwise had that lead to the next right step.
I love that. That's really good because I think you're right. When we get so in our routine and the monotony of everyday life, and it can feel so like, okay, well, I'm doing all the right things on paper. So why do I feel like I'm missing it? And sometimes
Yeah.
we just need to take the pressure off of ourselves and just get out of the rut by just taking one step in a different direction. I love that. And I think
Yep.
it's so
Yep.
refreshing because it reminds us there's not this huge pressure on us to be perfect. That's not what
Yeah.
God's heart is for us to be living
Yeah.
purposefully in our calling
Yeah.
and assignments,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's more about just like, how can I show up in this day? I mean, I've been thinking about it in motherhood. Like this season, I've got
Mhm.
a daughter who's about to turn 1, and I've been
Mhm.
thinking through this again. I'm sure you have too. It's like, man,
Mhm.
sometimes the assignments are not big and flashy and exciting.
Yes. Yep.
Sometimes it's the little things along the way, but
Yep.
they are just as purposeful
Yep.
as the moments when we are in our sweet spot of speaking on a stage or using our
Yeah.
gifts and talents and all of that. And like, I think it's so easy for us to, you even mentioned comparing ourselves and like looking what other people are doing and
Mhm.
thinking, oh, well, maybe I'm missing something because my
Yeah.
life seems like really simple.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that we have the freedom for our assignments to evolve,
Yeah.
it really shakes that weight off of us, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I always tell, like, I've had different conversations with friends of mine who, you know, became mothers early in their life and they feel like their life is pretty mundane and routine and they've not gone out and done anything big, right? And it's interesting because when I was in my season of struggling with fertility and hoping to become a mom, I thought, you have the dream. Like, I was doing all of the
Mm,
big, flashy, cool things of writing books and speaking on stages and growing big social media followings and all the things that I think our generation would find to be successful, right? And would
right.
call cool and the goal and success. And I was in it and I felt like, yeah, this is nice. I'm thankful. I'm thankful to be able to do this. But what it didn't even compare to what the real dream was for me. And now being in a motherhood season, I like want to speak to, and whether you're a mom or not, just whatever the like mundane season is, but I think a lot of moms do feel that way. And I just always want to say, like, you're not missing out. Like I often think of my own mom's example, and I love this, and I share it with my friends a lot because she spent a significant part of her young adult life home with us, and she did a few little freelance projects. And it's not like that she didn't work, but she didn't do the typical like chasing huge career dreams. But
Mm,
then when we became high schoolers and we were more independent and we were like, Mom, we don't want to be around you, we're doing our own thing. That in her 40s is when she built her bigger career and her really cool business and like the thing that everyone thought was amazing. She worked in professional sports, like it was the coolest thing, and she had no professional sport experience in her life, so it was just funny. But that was the time that she took her skills and experiences that she had gathered throughout her life, her bilingual skills, all of these things. And she was able to build something in her 40s and into her 50s. I think sometimes we forget that we have a lot of life and we don't have to do it all in our 20s and 30s. You don't have to raise the kids and have the biggest career or business years of your life. Like, you don't have to do it all at one time. And I think that is just such a like life-giving and refreshing example that there are
yeah.
seasons and times, and that goes back to what I was saying before, is there's a phase for everything. And even Ecclesiastes says for everything there is a season. And I think we forget about that in our own lives because we think we have to be doing it all right now. And we don't. And that's okay, and you're not missing out if this is a time for you to have a more simple day-to-day life and to say no to the bigger things or not even have the opportunity to pursue the big things. I just think we need to hear that more, like you're not missing out. I've done it. It's great. I'm thankful for it. But I'm telling you, the simple, like I told my husband even yesterday, we were cleaning up after the boys went to bed. And I was like, how cool is it that like we are just cleaning our home and there's no like there's no grief, there's no tragedy, there's no like this is
Mm,
like the simple, boring, everyday, like our kids are just sleeping and our life is very simple right now and it is what it is. Like that's a huge blessing. And I think I have that
mm,
perspective after walking through years of feeling like I was just like bracing for impact and one hardship after another and a lot of grief. Like just the joy and the blessing of simplicity and of being able to just steward the mundane is a huge gift. And there's a lot of people who are in really tragic, grief stricken, hard situations who would trade anything to have that simple calling of whether it's wiping booties or feeding snacks or, keeping a home or whatever it might look like. And I think we just have to have that perspective because it can be so easy to get down on the boring things, and the boring things are actually a blessing.
absolutely. It's so easy to miss that. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember when we were going through our journey, I had 3 miscarriages as well. And I
Mm.
just remember thinking, I don't know if I'm ever going to get past this, but I feel like
Yeah.
this is something that God put in my heart. So like
Mhm.
what do I do with that? And then, processing through that and then finally getting pregnant.
Yeah.
And I just remember you get into the mom mode of like, oh, I can't wait for this season or like on to the next
Yeah.
thing. And I
Yeah.
just had to stop myself and be like, I am living in my answered prayer. And how often do
Yes.
we miss that in the simple things because
Mhm.
we think it needs to be bigger or more exciting or from a larger platform? And that's just,
Yep.
we get so distracted by that and we can so easily miss that, like the little things that
Yeah.
are such a huge gift and a huge blessing in the seasons that really in the big
Yeah.
scheme of things go by so fast.
I know. I know. It's so true. And that's why I always say, like, I think we can easily get FOMO because of the internet.
Yeah.
And it's like, but man, like, don't miss where you are because you think you should be somewhere else?
Absolutely. So I would love to know before we go if there's a woman who's listening who's maybe thinking like, man, I just have this big dream or this thing in my heart that I feel like God is calling me to, whether it's motherhood,
Mhm.
whether it's speaking,
Mhm.
whether, like whatever that looks
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
but she's just not there yet. What would
Mhm.
you say to her about living purposefully in the season that she's in or while she's waiting
Yeah. I always say don't let a waiting season become a wasted season.
Mm.
And so whether you're waiting for the first big opportunity to take a speaking event, or waiting to meet your husband, or waiting to get that first pregnancy test, positive pregnancy test, or whatever it is, right? Um, in this time of, anticipating it and hoping for it, allow it to be a season of preparation. And what I mean by that, especially if it's a painful season, like let's say you are on a fertility type journey like we've gone
Mm.
through, or a single season that has been really difficult or something. I'm not suggesting you go read a ton of marriage books or a ton of parenting books, but there are countless ways to allow God to prepare you and to grow as a person and take on new skills and new knowledge and things that will serve whatever the next season for you is, whether it's the one you desire or the one that God has for you. And even if that isn't what you think it's going to be. So whether that's, investing in your mental health and seeing, a counselor, whether that's, learning new skills, going back to school, this might be your season to try new things from a career standpoint. Um, Volunteering, making a difference in your community. My husband and I, in our waiting season, we checked a lot of things off of our bucket list. We went hiking a glacier. We rode in a hot air balloon. We did things that we thought these are the things we want to look back and say that we were able to do. We volunteered. We checked things off our bucket list. We took on new hobbies. We learned new skills. Those are the things that really refined us. And I feel like gave me so much more insight, made me such a more well-rounded person, got me off my phone and got me out of like work mode to really grow as an individual. God really used that to give me perspective, to teach me things, to give me insights that have really served me well in this season that I desired for so long. And I think that that's something we can come back to when we can't force the opportunity or the positive test or the partner or whatever it is that we're hoping for. We can't force that to happen any faster than it's going to, right? Like we're not in control of the timing of our life, but we can prepare. And we can prepare with an open heart posture of like, I hope that the next season, or that I will get into the season I desire, whether it's marriage or motherhood or a new job or whatever it might be. But in the meantime, and while I'm here, I'm going to prepare and I'm going to grow as an individual, and I'm going to invest in my spiritual health, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, my relationships, my hobbies, my knowledge, my interests. And I promise you that's going to serve you so well. It's going to make the waiting season seem a lot less pointless. You're not just like standing there aimlessly. It'll make sure that the waiting season isn't wasted because you're growing as an individual, and it's going to prepare you for what God has next for you, whether it's what you think you want or whether it's something entirely different. So that's my best advice for that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you letting people into your process and sharing your story, because it is so easy to get caught up in what we feel like we're missing.
Yeah.
But the idea that we can shift our perspective and see God even in the hard seasons, even in the waiting seasons, and we can still show up with purpose and intention while we're waiting and while we're still figuring it out is so encouraging. So thank you so much for being here, Jordan. Would you tell everybody where they can connect with you and learn more from here?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. You can find me on Instagram at Jordan Lee Dooley, or jordanleedooley.com is where you can find a bunch of my resources and books and podcasts. Oh, and I have a podcast called She. So if you are into womanhood and wellness from a faith-based perspective, that is a great show to tune into as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here with us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune in to another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and your support truly means the world to me. If you enjoyed this episode, would you leave a quick review? It really helps our community grow and reach more women. If you want more, you can shop my books, Waking Up, Living Open, and Love Is on Amazon. And be sure to sign up for my email list so you always get the latest news. I can't wait to chat again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on social media, and remember, I'm cheering you on.